Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Mikey. You guys are rocking with me and Mikey's Intellectual Corner. On today's episode, I thought we'd dive into something new. This is Johnny Harris, the real reason why Putin is preparing for war in the Ukraine. So, as somebody who actually deployed to Europe in 2017 for this exact situation, because of the whole Crimea Peninsula situation. I felt like, what I'm saying, it's one of those things that I'm kind of invested in a little bit, but at the same time, I'm not gonna lie, I didn't have the best time there because I think I spent like 3 months in a tent, living by the open field with goats and stuff. And when I was in Romania, I was in Poland for about 6 months, which was okay, really cold though. And then I lived in Germany for about 3 months while I was there, all because of this. And so I just thought it would be a little interesting to check it out. So without further ado, we're just gonna go ahead and get into it. So let's go.
Russian invasion of Ukraine.
Momentum is building for a war between Ukraine and Russia.
Tensions between Russia and the West are growing rapidly.
President Biden considering deploying thousands of troops to Eastern Europe.
There are now 100,000 troops on the eastern border of Ukraine. Russia is setting up field hospitals on this border. Like, this is what preparation for war looks like, a legitimate war.
Ukrainian troops.
More war or a field exercise, but either way is a provocative action. So
Ukrainian troops are watching and waiting, saying they are preparing for a fight.
The US has ordered the families of embassy staff to leave Ukraine. Britain has sent all of their non-essential staff home. And now the US is sending tons of weapons and munitions to Ukraine's army. And we're even considering deploying our own troops to the region. I mean, this thing is heating.
well, I mean, I can tell you right now from case point experience. We've been over there in that area for a very long time, because you have to remember we have a crap ton of bases over there in Germany and all over the place. I think we were even starting to set up in Poland. We have a bunch of bases in Romania, so there's already exercises going on as we speak. And like I said before, I was in over there for 9 months back in 2017. So I think essentially for the entire month, or for the entire year, or essentially of 2017, I think I was there from January to October. And what I'm saying, we were there because of this situation. So it's not they're going to, like, we've been there because of this. Like, it's just going to ramp up, if anything.
Deploying our own troops to the region. I mean, this thing is heating up. Meanwhile, Russia and the West have been in Geneva and Brussels trying to talk it out and sort of getting nowhere.
The message is very clear. Should Russia take further aggressive actions against Ukraine, the costs will be severe and the consequences serious.
It's a scary, grim momentum that is unpredictable, and the chances of miscalculation and escalation are growing. I want to explain what's going on here, but I want to show you that this isn't just typical geopolitical behavior, stuff that can just be explained on the map. Instead, to understand why 100,000 troops are camped out on Ukraine's eastern border, ready for war, you have to understand Russia and how it's been cut down over the ages, from a Slavic empire that dominated this whole region to then the Soviet Union, which was defeated in the 90s. And what you really...
Well, I mean, yeah, in the past, obviously, the Russian Empire and the USSR both had the Ukraine in its territory and all that stuff. But at the same time, the modern Russian and modern Ukrainian, don't care about that. They just want to live their lives as, separate entities, for their own reasons. They don't care about the past or any of that stuff. So obviously this isn't on the people. This is on the government and stuff like that, which is what I'm guessing though.
To then the Soviet Union, which was defeated in the 90s. And what you really have to understand here is how that history is transposed onto the brain of one man, this guy, Vladimir Putin. This is a story about regional domination and struggles between big powers, but really, it's the story about what Vladimir Putin really wants.
Russian troops moving swiftly to take control of military bases in Crimea.
Russia is amassing more than 100,000 troops and a lot of military hardware at the border with Ukraine.
Okay, let's get up to speed on what's happening here. And I'm just gonna quickly give you the highlight version of like the news that's happening because I wanna get into the juicy part, which is like why, the roots of all of this. So let's go.
Yeah, because I'm not gonna lie, I used to watch the news like a lot, but as of recently, I've stopped doing that stuff because it's starting to get a little bit annoying. But so I'm not gonna lie, I've actually been kind of lost in solace, other than what I've known for the past like whatever, however years. That was like when I played. That was like what 5, 6 years ago now. So it's been a minute. So let's see.
So let's go. A few months ago, Russia started sending more and more troops to this border. It's this massive border between Ukraine and Russia. They said they were doing a military exercise, but the rest of the world was like, yeah, we totally believe you, Russia. This was right before this big meeting where North American and European countries were coming together to talk about a lot of different things like these countries often do in these diplomatic summits. But soon, because of Russia's aggressive behavior coming in and setting up 100,000 troops on the border with Ukraine, the entire summit turned into a whole WTF Russia, what are you doing on the border of Ukraine meeting. Before the meeting, Putin comes out and says, listen, I have some demands for the West. And everyone's like, okay, Russia, what are your demands? You know, we have like COVID-19 right now and like that's like surging. So like we don't.
Yeah, so I mean, if you think about it, obviously it would make sense as to why he's doing right now because Russia obviously knows that they in a war they can't really win against NATO like they used to probably be able to because they used to be essentially a whole gang of state or countries that was just one entity, you know what I'm saying, along with the Warsaw Pact and all that stuff. But right now they're essentially alone. They may have Belarus, but I mean that's about it. So obviously, they're thinking right now, while every country is battling with COVID, and you know what I'm saying they're getting devastated and all this stuff, might be the best time to actually try to get these demands and try to get you know the Crimean Peninsula and Sevastopol and all that good stuff. But let's see.
You know, we have like COVID-19 right now and like that's like surging. So like we don't need your like bluster about what your demands are. And Putin's like, no, here's my list of demands. Putin's demands for the summit were this. Number one, that NATO, which is this big military alliance between US, Canada, and Europe, stop expanding, meaning they don't let any new members in, okay? So Russia's like, no more new members to your like cool military club that I don't like. You can't have any more members. Number two, that NATO withdraw all of their troops from anywhere in Eastern Europe. Basically, Putin is saying, I can veto any military cooperation or troops going between countries that have to do with Eastern Europe, the place that used to be the Soviet Union, okay? And number three, Putin demands that America vow not to protect its allies in Eastern Europe with nuclear weapons.
Like I said, that's not going to happen. One, we've already invested so much money into being over there, in the Eastern Bloc and stuff like that. Like I said, when I was over there, we were facilitated by so much stuff. I remember whenever we were in Romania, we stayed on somebody's farmland, like a private farmland. Like that may sound cheap, but in reality, that dude probably got paid like out the you know what I'm saying, out the ass. So this shit isn't cheap just to go over there and play army, you know what I'm saying? That's actually really expensive, especially on the upkeep of all the equipment, just to do something that's stupid like that, you know what I'm saying? It's not cheap. So for us to do all that expensive stuff, and just to say, okay, Russia, you're right, we'll just go, and essentially all that was for nothing. That's not gonna happen, along with everything else. So
allies in Eastern Europe with nuclear weapons. LOL, said all of the other countries. You're literally nuts, Vladimir Putin. Like, these are the most ridiculous demands ever. But there he is, Putin, with these demands, these very, very aggressive demands. And he sort of is implying that if his demands aren't met, he's going to invade Ukraine. I mean, it doesn't work like this. This is not how international relations work. You don't just show up and say, like, I'm not going to allow other countries to join your alliance because it makes me feel uncomfortable. But what I love about this list of demands from Vladimir Putin for this summit is that it gives us a clue on what Vladimir Putin really wants, what he's after here. You read them closely and you can grasp his intentions. But to grasp those intentions, you have to understand what NATO is and what Russia and Ukraine
like I said, Ukraine and Russia were at one point one and the same. You know what I'm saying? Russia, or the Ukraine and Russia, was essentially like the state of Colorado in the United States. You know what I'm saying? Like they were one and the same. Obviously, me being a Coloradan, I can also say I'm an American. Just like if you were Ukrainian back then, you can also say you were a Russian or you were a Soviet Union. You know, whatever. You know what I'm saying? So it's just one of those things. There was one and the same. So not to mention, I'm sure Putin has some Ukrainian blood in him. So because again, it was the same country. So it's just one of those.
Grasp his intentions. But to grasp those intentions, you have to understand what NATO is and what Russia and Ukraine used to be. Okay, so a while back I made this video about why Russia is so damn big, where I explain how modern day Russia started here in Kiev, which is actually modern day Ukraine. In other words, modern day Russia, as we know it, has its original roots in Ukraine. These places grew up together, and they eventually became a part of the same mega empire called the Soviet Union. They were deeply intertwined, not just in their history and their culture, but also in their economy and their politics. So it's after World War II, it's like the 50s, 60s, 70s, and NATO was formed, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. This was a military alliance between all of these countries that was meant to sort of deter the Soviet Union from expanding and taking over the world. But, as we all know, the Soviet Union, which was Russia and all of these other countries, collapsed in 1991. And all of these Soviet republics...
Not to mention the Warsaw Pact, that was also gone too, so Russia also lost pretty much all of its allies, or most of its allies. Essentially about 90% of its allies it lost, so... You know what I'm saying? That actually really affected it too. So.
1991. And all of these Soviet republics, including Ukraine, became independent, meaning they were not now a part of one big block of countries anymore. But just because the borders all split up, it doesn't mean that these cultural ties actually broke. Like, for example, the Soviet leader at the time of the collapse of the Soviet Union, this guy, Gorbachev, he was the son of a Ukrainian mother and a Russian father. Like, he grew up with his mother singing him Ukrainian folk songs. In his mind, Ukraine and Russia were like one thing. So there was major reluctance to accept Ukraine as a separate thing from Russia. In so many ways, they are one. There was another Russian at the time who did not accept this new division.
I'm sure a lot of older Russians who were probably political probably feel the same way in the fact of that, but I mean, again, you see these videos where they're asking the everyday normal Russian, what do they think about this? And they don't understand why it's happening, you know what I'm saying? They just think it's a waste of time, waste of money, waste of resource, all that stuff. So it's just one of those things, you know?
Accept this new division. This young intelligence officer, Vladimir Putin, who was starting to rise up in the ranks of post-Soviet Russia. There's this amazing quote from 2005 where Putin is giving the State of the Union address, where Putin declares the collapse of the Soviet Union, quote, the greatest catastrophe of the 20th century. And as for the Russian people, it became a genuine tragedy. Tens of millions of fellow citizens and countrymen found themselves beyond...
Well, obviously, he had patriotism and pride for his country that he was born in and raised in, and obviously served in, because I'm pretty sure he was in the KGB in the Soviet Union, so obviously he has a lot of, a lot of patriotism for it. But so obviously, just like how if say the United States broke up, and I'd be upset about that, I'm not gonna lie. So I'm sure that he feels the exact same way, so I understand it in that sense. But it's just one of those things where it's like, it's over and done with. This stuff happened like almost 30 years ago, so you know what I'm saying.
Men found themselves beyond the fringes of Russian territory. Do you see how he frames this? The Soviet Union were all one people in his mind. And after it collapsed, all of these people who were a part of the motherland were now outside of the fringes or the boundaries of Russian territory. First off, fact check. Greatest catastrophe of the 20th century? Like, do you remember what else happened in the 20th century, Vladimir? Putin's worry about the collapse of this one people starts to get way worse when the West, his enemy, starts showing up to his neighborhood, to all these ex-Soviet countries that are now independent. The West starts selling their ideology of democracy and capitalism and inviting them to join their military alliance called NATO. And guess what? These countries are totally buying it. All these ex-Soviet countries are now joining NATO, and some of them the EU, and Putin is hating this.
So if you look at this map, they lost their entire Warsaw Pact to the NATO, which was obviously at one point their enemy. So in his mind, somebody who grew up in the Soviet Union, somebody who, all that stuff, that is kind of, a crappy situation where you see the entirety of them going away. And obviously, also, if you look at this map, Ukraine would be the last one, because obviously Austria might join. There's been talks about Sweden and Finland, like this action's actually been pushing them more towards it, and the fact that Ukraine has been talking about it. So this actually would just leave, if you look at it, Belarus, and the only country in Europe other than Russia not siding with NATO, which means if a war ever broke out, it's the entire continent against them. So it's just, it's kind of, you can kind of see where he's coming from, obviously, but listen.
EU, and Putin is hating this. He's like, not only did the Soviet Union divide and all of these people are now outside of the Russia motherland, but now they're being persuaded by the West to join their military alliance. This is terrible news. Over the years, this continues to happen while Putin himself starts to chip away at Russian institutions, making them weaker and weaker. He's silencing his rivals, and he's consolidating power in himself. And in the past few years, he's effectively silenced anyone who can challenge him. Any institution, any court, or any political rival have all been silenced. It's been decades since the Soviet Union fell, but as Putin gains more power, he still sees the region through the lens of the old Cold War, Soviet, Slavic Empire view. He sees this region as one big block that has been torn apart by outside forces. The greatest catastrophe of the 20th century. And the worst situation of all of these, according to Putin, is Ukraine, which was like the gem of the Soviet.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if you're even if you follow, like, say, just things like World War II and stuff, you know that how important Ukraine was, even in that even in that war, because that was essentially, as Hitler and Germans called it, the breadbasket of the Soviet Union. Like, that was one of the main areas of land, obviously this huge area of land that they needed and wanted to capture. That way they could start to really starve out the Soviet Union and stuff like that. So that's how important this land really is. It's a very fertile and prosperous land. Obviously that's where, I'm saying, their earliest ancestors started from. So obviously it's an area of that has good growth potential and stuff like that. So
is Ukraine, which was like the gem of the Soviet Union. There was tons of cultural heritage. Again, Russia sort of started in Ukraine. Not to mention, it was a very populous and industrious, resource-rich place. And over the years, Ukraine has been drifting west. It hasn't joined NATO yet, but more and more it's been electing pro-Western presidents. It's been flirting with membership in NATO. It's becoming less and less attached to the Russian heritage that Putin so adores. And more than half of Ukrainians say that they'd be down to join the EU. 64% of them say that they would be cool joining NATO. But Putin can't handle this. He is in total denial. Like an ex-boyfriend who can't handle his ex-girlfriend starting.
Well, again, it's not, I don't even think it's about jealousy or anything like that, like how he's saying it. I just think it's mainly the fact that Russia isn't going to join this thing, which I feel like they really should, just for the fact that it could, I'm saying, if war is put on literally the back burner of this world's priorities, and we can really start to get further in I'm saying, and what we need to do to become, like, stage one civilization, stage two, all that stuff. So, but in any case, so in reality, Russia's not going to join this thing that it's been having distrust for us for over almost essentially almost a century now. So why would they? So obviously, them seeing everyone around them, literally everyone around them, join this thing, it is kind of worrying, and it does make them feel like if anything happened, well, they're pretty much done. There's nothing they can do because it's essentially the entire world against them. So it's just what I'm saying. But then again, maybe it's the fact that they want certain positions. I don't know. It's just
Can't handle this. He is in total denial. Like an ex-boyfriend who can't handle his ex-girlfriend starting to date someone else, Putin can't let Ukraine go. He won't let go. So for the past decade, he's been trying to keep the West out and bring Ukraine back into the motherland of Russia. This usually takes the form of Putin sending secret soldiers from Russia into Ukraine to help the people in Ukraine who want to like separate from Ukraine and join Russia. It also takes the form of, oh yeah, stealing entire parts of Ukraine for Russia.
yeah. I remember when we were in Poland and in Romania, our commander, he pulled us aside, and both times, and I was just like, all right, whatever. But both times he was like, if Russia decides to invade the Ukraine, like actually invade them again, and we're here, we're going to go over there and we're going to help them and essentially just get ready because we're pretty much all going to die. They have too much equipment, too many men for us to really do anything. We're just here to slow them down until the rest of NATO and the rest of the troops and backup and stuff can actually get there, and the actual real bulk of the war can really start. So is essentially we would be like how Dunkirk, and we would be the French and let slow it down essentially, and sacrifice ourselves. But it's one of those things. So if you're a soldier and you ever find yourself over there, just know you're gonna be in some crap if anything goes down. But yeah.
Entire parts of Ukraine for Russia.
Russian troops moving swiftly to take control of military bases in Crimea.
Like in 2014, Putin just did this.
To what America is officially calling a Russian invasion of Ukraine.
He went down and just snatched this bit of Ukraine and folded it into Russia. So you're starting to see what's going on here. Putin's life's work is to salvage what he calls the greatest catastrophe of the 20th century, the division and the separation of the Soviet republics from Russia. So let's get to present day. It's 2022. Putin is at it again. And honestly, if you really want to understand the mind of Vladimir Putin and his whole view on this, you have to read this. On the History of Unity of Russians and Ukrainians by Vladimir Putin, a blog post that kind of sounds like a 9th grade history essay. In this essay, Vladimir Putin argues that Russia and Ukraine are one people. He calls them essentially the same historical and spiritual space. Kind of beautiful writing, honestly. Anyway, he argues that the division between the two countries is due to, quote, a deliberate effort by those forces that have always sought to undermine our unity. And that the formula they use, these outside forces, is a classic one: divide and rule. And then he launches into this super in-depth, like 10-page argument as to every single historical...
Obviously he feels like, you know what I'm saying, if it wasn't for NATO and America and the Cold War and all that stuff, then Ukraine and Russia and probably Belarus and some of the other states like Kazakhstan and all that would still be in Russia, in the Russian Federation, Russian territory, whatever. And but because of that, they, essentially they got the thought of revolution and thought of independence in their mind, and that's why they broke off. Maybe that's what I'm getting, bro. But
every single historical beat of Ukraine and Russia's history to make this argument that like this is one people and the division is totally because of outside powers, i.e. the West. Okay, but listen, there's this moment at the end of the post that actually kind of hit me in a big way. He says this: just have a look at Austria and Germany, or the US and Canada, how they live next to each other. Close in ethnic composition, culture, and in fact sharing one language, they remain sovereign states with their own interests, with their own foreign policy, but this does not prevent them from the closest integration or allied relations. They have very conditional, transparent borders, and when crossing them, citizens feel at home. They create families, study,
Yeah, well, unfortunately, there are other states in the world who are also very close in composition and very close in culture and everything else, who don't get along, who hate each other, i.e., North Korea, South Korea, i.e., Pakistan and India. They're pretty close. If you, I mean, obviously they were in the same. They're essentially the same land. They own that. The only reason they even have that border is because of the British. So they, you know what I'm saying, they're also a land that have the same composition, same culture almost. Because there are a lot of, you know what I'm saying, it's just that thing where, because of religious lines, they have to draw that territory line right there, and boom, you know what I'm saying. But in any case, so, it's just one of those things. But I don't know. So that's why I say, like, you know, you can't, just because there are three other examples of countries getting along doesn't mean that everybody gets along, because they really don't.
Feel at home. They create families, study, work, do business. Incidentally, so do millions of those born in Ukraine who now live in Russia. We see them as our own close people. I mean, listen, like, I'm not in support of what Putin is doing, but like that's like a pretty solid like analogy. If China suddenly showed up and started like coaxing Canada into being a part of its alliance, I would be a little bit like, what's going on here? That's what Putin feels. And so I kind of get what he means there. There's a deep heritage and connection between these people. And he's seen that falter and dissolve, and he doesn't like it. He clearly, genuinely feels a brotherhood and this deep.
If anything, then if you feel that way, then do you really think war and wanting and trying to annex land and stuff is really the way to go? Because obviously those don't really, those are two different thought processes. So it's either you feel that way or you're a hypocrite and you don't feel that when you just said some stuff, because obviously maybe a better way of going about getting them to coax them back into Russia's arms and Russia's ally and stuff like that was maybe, you know, trade and treaties and stuff like that, not, you know, annexing and bullying and war and invasion. Like, that doesn't make sense, you know what I'm saying? So.
Brotherhood and this deep heritage connection with the people of Ukraine. Okay, Putin, I get it. Your essay is compelling there at the end. You're clearly very smart and well-read. But this does not justify what you've been up to, okay? It doesn't justify sending 100,000 troops to the border, or sending cyber soldiers to sabotage the Ukrainian government, or annexing territory, fueling a conflict that has killed tens of thousands of people in eastern Ukraine. No. Okay? No matter how much affection you feel for Ukrainian heritage and its connection to Russia, this is not okay. Again, it's like the boyfriend who genuinely loves his girlfriend. They had a great relationship, but they broke up, and she's free to see whomever she wants. But Putin is not ready to let go.
What the hell's wrong with you? I love you, Jessica. What the hell is wrong with you, dude? Don't fucking touch me. I love you, dude. World star!
Putin has constructed his own reality here, one in which Ukraine is actually being controlled by.
He knows they're not getting held hostage, and if anything, he knows that they're willing to go, and that's why he feels that he has to hold them hostages, which is what he's doing, because he knows that he's holding them hostage because he knows that the Ukraine can't join NATO if they're in an active military situation before they join, or while they're joining. I think that's an actual like limitation as to who can join and stuff like. So, you know what I'm saying? It's just one of those things, but, you know.
Being controlled by shadowy Western forces who are holding the people of Ukraine hostage. And if that he invades, it'll be a swift victory because Ukrainians will accept him with open arms. The Great Liberator. Like, this guy's a total romantic. He's a history buff and a romantic, and he has a hill to die on here. And it is liberating the people who've been taken from the Russian motherland. Kind of like the abusive boyfriend who's like, she actually really loves me, but it's her annoying friends who are planting all these ideas in her head. That's why she broke up with me. And it's like, no, dude, she's over you.
What the hell's wrong with you? I love you, Jessica.
I mean, maybe this video should be called Putin is just like your abusive ex-boyfriend.
What the hell's wrong with you? I love you, Jessica. What's wrong with you?
So where does this leave us? It's 2022. Putin is showing up to these meetings in Europe to tell them where he stands. He says, NATO, you cannot expand anymore. No new members, and you need to withdraw all your troops from Eastern Europe, my neighborhood. He knows these demands will never be accepted because they're ludicrous, but what he's doing is...
Which is fine because obviously that's something that people have done numerous times in history, with the most famous case in point, World War I and Austria-Hungary sending Serbia those horrible freaking concessions or whatever in their treaty, and Serbia actually consenting to a few of them, but not being able to consent to all of them because it was just ridiculous. And before we know it, war is being declared. So,
showing a false effort to say, well, we tried to negotiate with the West, but they didn't want to. Hence, giving a little bit more justification to a Russian invasion. So, will Russia invade? Is there war coming? Maybe. It's impossible to know because it's all inside of the head of this guy. But if I were to make the best argument that war is not coming tomorrow, I would look at a few things. Number one, war in Ukraine would be incredibly costly for Vladimir Putin. Russia has a far superior army to Ukraine's, but still Ukraine has a very...
And again, he wouldn't just be facing, he would not just be facing the Ukraine, he'd be facing NATO right off the bat. Because I'm telling you right now, while I was in Poland and all those, we had freaking Dutch, we had the Dutch there, we had, obviously America was there, we had Crimea was there, not Crimea, sorry, freaking Croatia was there, freaking, there's a few different, Hungary, there's a few different countries that were there, because I remember there was like, while we were in Romania, there was like, we were sharing the farmland with like 5 different countries, so you know what I'm saying, like, this, just because, you know what I'm saying, you don't hear it on national news doesn't mean, like, I'm telling you, go talk to a friend who is about to deploy over there, they'll let you know, if they're allowed to anyway, that this has actually already been sealed. Like, NATO right off the jump is going to go to war with Russia if this happens. Again, but listen.
Very good army that is supported by the West and would give Putin a pretty bad bloody nose in any invasion. Controlling territory in Ukraine would be very hard. Ukraine is a giant country. They would fight back, and it would be very hard to actually conquer and take over territory. Another major point here is that if Russia invades Ukraine, this gives NATO new purpose. If you remember, NATO was created because of the Cold War, because the Soviet Union was big and nuclear powered. Once the Soviet Union fell, NATO sort of has been looking for a new purpose over the past couple decades. If Russia invades Ukraine, NATO suddenly has a brand new purpose to unite and to invest in becoming more powerful than ever. Putin knows that, and it would be very bad news for him if that happened.
Technically, NATO already has its purpose. I would just give it a huge purpose, but it already has a purpose that where it's not gonna just go away. And the fact that it's a treaty that is almost stopping future wars in Europe, for one, because nobody can go to war if they're in this huge, you know what I'm saying, treaty, like a coalition. It also helps, it also, I know, does things with immigration, with people's, with different countries' finances. So it actually does a lot of different political things, to where if it just collapsed one day, I feel like a lot of different countries would be kind of ass out, to where now so many countries are depending on it, it probably won't. It's pretty much here to stay, one of those things. But who knows, though? I know a lot of countries aren't going to or have the capability of leaving. You know, obviously, United States case in point, but it's just one of those things where if, you know, the reality is we're probably not. So.
But most importantly, perhaps the easiest clue for me to believe that war isn't coming tomorrow is the Russian propaganda machine is not preparing the Russian people for an invasion. In 2014, when Russia was about to invade and take over Crimea, this part of Ukraine, there was a barrage of state propaganda that prepared the Russian people that this was a justified attack. So when it happened, it wasn't a surprise and it felt very normal. That isn't happening right now in Russia, at least for now. It may start happening tomorrow, but for now, I think Putin is showing up to the border, flexing his muscles, and showing the West that he is earnest. I'm not sure that he's going to invade tomorrow, but he very well could. I mean, read the guy's blog post and you'll realize that he is a romantic about this. He is incredibly idealistic about the glory days of the Slavic empires, and he wants to get it back. So there is dangerous momentum towards war. And the way war works is even a small little fight can turn into the other guy doing something bigger and crazier, and then the other person has to respond with something a little bit bigger. That's called escalation. And there's not really a ceiling to...
Well, usually though, that ceiling is just the fact that calmer heads in the country who don't really want this to happen will go and speak to the president or whoever and let them know, like, hey, we need, we have to have a conference because this is getting a little out of control, whatever. And in those conferences, maybe something happens, maybe something doesn't. Obviously, case in point, whenever we were in the Cuban Missile Crisis, JFK and what's his face would call each other, frequently, and that was them trying to de-escalate the situation, try and put that ceiling on the situation. Obviously, though, sometimes it just doesn't work that way, but sometimes it does. So it's just one of those things.
How much that momentum can spin out of control. That is why it's so scary when two nuclear countries go to war with each other, because there's kind of no ceiling. So yeah, it's dangerous. This is scary. I'm not sure what happens next here, but the best we can do is keep an eye on this. At least for now, we better understand what Putin really wants out of all of this. Thanks for watching.
Go ahead and end it right there. So yeah, it's just one of those things where, obviously, I mean, think about it, like 2 years ago, we were about to go to war heavy with freaking Iran, now we're about to go to war heavy with Russia. And who knows, it's kind of scary because if Russia goes to war and they're already at war with the United States, who knows, North Korea might go ahead and just say, this is our chance, might as well go ahead and take advantage. And now we're at, what was a small conflict is now a World War III, essentially. So that's how kind of crazy that escalation could actually probably get. But in any case, so if you guys like the video, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and see you guys when I see you. I'm out.